Self-driving cars have been an engineer's dream for a long time. In this video made by General Motors in the 1950s, it shows a car of the future driving a family on a road trip using something called Autopilot. Only in this concept, the car is controlled by a tower with a human making the decisions, similar to air traffic control.
If you haven't watched this video, it's actually out there on YouTube. In fact, I'll put a link down in the description for it. It's actually really fascinating to see what people back then thought that the future was going to be like. Personally, it looks like the biggest thing they misunderstood is exactly how much traffic that we were going to have.
Of course, growing up, Hollywood continued to tease the idea that someday cars would be able to drive themselves, such as Kit from Knight Rider, or the Johnny Cab from Total Recall.
You're in a Johnny Cab.
Or Lenina Huxley's police car from Demolition Man, which, by the way, made an appearance in Sequest DSV as well. It's one of many technologies us kids believed would be around when we grew up, along with flying cars and giant space station hotels, or colonies on the moon, or, for that matter, artificial intelligence.
I'm afraid I can't do that.
And while I am disappointed that we don't have colonies on the moon and flying cars and stuff like that, I can at least say that I have talked to an artificial intelligence and ridden in a self-driving car. Two things that if you'd asked me a couple of years ago, I would say I would probably never experience in my lifetime. And there are two primary reasons that I wanted to make this video. First is I just find the technology fascinating and interesting, but the other reason is because when I watch these videos on YouTube and even on the mainstream news, they're often misreporting or misrepresenting full self-driving, especially when it comes to Tesla. They're often saying that it doesn't work, it's never going to work, and it's some kind of investor scam or so on and so forth, which is just at odds with my personal experience. And so I just felt compelled to show the world what I've experienced.
So first I want to introduce you to my car and give you some general information about it. This is Smurf. I bought it 2 years ago. It came in the standard white color, but I didn't care much for any of Tesla's factory colors, so I had it wrapped this way. Now, while I think it looks awesome, I'm well aware that the color scheme is polarizing. If I were to make a graph of the number of people that love it or hate it, it would look something like this, with almost nobody falling in the middle. But I can say that everyone notices it, and I'm the only one with this color scheme to my knowledge.
I'd also like to interject here that I also realize that Tesla and, of course, Elon Musk are controversial topics at this stage, and I just want to make it clear that I started this video back in 2024. It has no political objective. I am not taking sides on the issue. This is just an objective look at a piece of fascinating technology. Now, granted, the video focuses mostly on Tesla because that's what I have access to and that's what I have experience with. But don't read anything more into it than what I said, an objective look at technology.
I also feel like self-driving in general, whether it be by Tesla or Waymo or anyone else, gets vilified in the news, and what we're seeing is something called selection bias, and I want to give you an example of how this works. So let's imagine a car. It could be a Chevrolet, maybe a Ford or Jeep. It doesn't really matter which brand it is. If it catches on fire, then the fire department shows up and puts it out, but other than that, nobody cares. If a Tesla, or really any sort of electric vehicle, catches fire, then the fire department shows up too, but you also get a news van and a few news helicopters and another news van, and of course this becomes front page news all over the world, leading to headlines like these and of course all over social media. And while everybody understands that EV fires are harder to put out than traditional cars, this sort of selection bias leads some people to believe that Teslas or EVs in general catch fire more often than gasoline cars, despite the fact the opposite is actually true. Unfortunately, self-driving cars are subject to the same news selection bias, so anytime there's an accident with one of these systems, it is front page news, again, leading a lot of people to believe that these systems are inherently unsafe or that they don't work. And so I wanted to set the record straight with this video. So back to Smurf for a moment. This is a base standard range Model 3. It has the LFP battery pack, which I specifically wanted. It has a range of 272 miles and a 0 to 60 time of around 5.6 seconds. It was literally the cheapest brand new Tesla I could buy, and after the tax incentives, it wound up costing me around $31,000.
Which I think is rather amusing because when I have shown this car in previous videos, I've always seen comments saying things to the effect that, look at David trying to flaunt his wealth or driving such an ostentatious vehicle or something of that nature, which I find so bizarre because, I paid approximately the same price as buying like a Toyota Camry or something like that. And nobody would have said that about me had I been driving around in a Toyota Camry. And part of the reason I bring this up is because I wanted people to understand that the technology I'm about to show is consumer level technology. This is not something that you have to spend $100,000 in order to experience.
The first thing I need to explain is the difference between Autopilot and FSD, which is short for full self-driving. These are two entirely different things. The media often gets it wrong when reporting on this. Even Mark Rober, who is one of my favorite YouTubers by the way, got it wrong when he made a video titled, "Can You Fool a Self-Driving Car?" In this video, he sets up a Wile E. Coyote style wall and has his Tesla drive straight through. The trouble is, in the video, he's using Autopilot, not FSD. So we're actually going to talk more about Mark Rober's video later in the video. So what's the difference? Autopilot is really nothing more than a fancy adaptive cruise control. When it first came out in 2014, it was really the best in its class, but to be honest, there are plenty of cars on the road today that have adaptive cruise control similar or even better than Autopilot. For example, this is my brother's Ford F-150, which is equipped with Blue Cruise. As you can see, it even offers a hands-free option, which seems to work pretty well. It also has not one, but two cameras watching over the driver, one here and the other one over here. However, this system only works on the highway and only on certain highways at that. It will not drive you around town. That being said, Blue Cruise is considered more advanced than Tesla's Autopilot. But just so we're clear, all Tesla Autopilot does is maintain your speed, keep you from hitting the car in front of you, and keep you centered in your lane. That is assuming your lane doesn't turn too sharply like with this guy. It's pretty handy in stop-and-go traffic, and much like any cruise control, it's also handy on the freeway, but just like any cruise control, you need to keep your hands on the wheel and be ready to take over if something happens. We've probably all seen the news stories about Autopilot-related crashes, and there are a lot of people who blame Tesla and have even attempted to sue Tesla for these sometimes deadly crashes. And while it makes for a good news story, a more objective way to look at it would be this. If the same accident had occurred in a different brand of vehicle, like a Ford or Chevrolet, with an equivalent cruise control system, nobody would be blaming the car manufacturer. They'd be blaming the driver. So let's face it, if the news media started reporting on cruise control-related crashes, then nobody would really care. The term Autopilot is just far better clickbait than cruise control. FSD is an entirely different software package for your Tesla. To drive the point home, a good analogy would be this. If Autopilot is the equivalent of having MS Paint on your computer, then FSD would be like having Photoshop. After you pay for and install FSD, you'll immediately notice the appearance of the center screen is different. I mean, just for comparison, let's look at two different Teslas. This is my friend Sean's Tesla. He named it Skippy. Smurf and Skippy actually spend a lot of time together. They're good friends. But Skippy is only equipped with Autopilot. So what we're going to do is drive both cars to the same intersection and find out how each of them sees the world. Now here's what Skippy looks like with regular Autopilot. It only cares about the lanes on either side of it and what's directly in front. Now let's see what Smurf sees with FSD at the same intersection. You can see the level of detail is seriously impressive. It's tracking every car within sight. By the way, this is always on the screen, even if you're driving the car manually. So this is one way to tell when you're watching a video if the Tesla in question has Autopilot or FSD. Speaking of, how does it see so much? Well, all Teslas are equipped with at least 8 cameras. The main cameras are at the top of the windshield here, but there are also cameras on the front fenders here and on the side pillars here. There are actually 2 cameras facing forward, a narrow view and a wide angle, and then you have the fender cameras looking somewhat backwards, and then the side pillars, and of course the rear camera. And there's another camera inside the cabin that's watching you. This way the car can monitor you and make sure you're watching the road. In fact, you can actually preview all of the car's cameras on the screen. This is the view it has to watch me. Then of course there's the FSD computer, which uses a neural processor to handle all of the pattern recognition and decision making. Actually, you may notice this section of the board looks almost identical to this section, and that's not a coincidence. It's like 2 computers in one, both doing the same job. This is for redundancy in case one fails.
So what we need to do now is find out, how good is it? What can it do? What can it not do? Is it safe? Those type of things. So I'm going to do my best to answer all of those questions.
So in order to answer the question of how good is Tesla's FSD, we have to first define some sort of scale. So this is a scale of driving perfection. It's nothing official, just something I came up with to illustrate a point. And at one end, I use a banana to represent something that can't drive at all. And then further up the scale, maybe a chimpanzee. And we have a number of different types of human drivers, such as a drunk driver, a sleepy driver, elderly driver, and a student driver. And then eventually to a normal driver. Now, notice that I don't have anything at the far end of perfection, and that's because nothing currently exists that can go there. Even a good human driver makes mistakes from time to time, and thus there is no perfect driver. So realistically, for AI to take over driving, it doesn't have to be perfect. It only has to be as good as this guy. So where do I rank Tesla's FSD? Well, a few years ago, I would have put it somewhere down here, but every few months they release a new update and it gets a little better and a little better. And this slow improvement has been going on for years. So where is it now? Well, I think the easiest way to answer that is just to show you. I've decided to take a trip from my house to downtown Dallas and hopefully see the giant eyeball of Dallas. And I've invited David Lovett from the YouTube channel Usagi Electric to join me. In fact, here he is now pulling up in his Japanese right-hand drive Nissan Cedric. Without wasting any time, he jumped in my car.
Nice.
Okay, so I've got David Lovett here with me. I brought him in because I thought he would be the perfect passenger because he knows about computers and you're an automotive expert.
I wouldn't. Depends on the cutoff date for expert there. Most of my stuff is from the 70s.
Anyway, what we're going to do is we have decided to go visit the giant eyeball of Dallas, which is in the middle of downtown. So that'll give us a great opportunity to drive through suburban neighborhoods, the freeway, and then, of course, downtown traffic. Or I say the car will do that for us, hopefully. So I'm going to go ahead and put in the address here. 1300 Elm Street is a parking garage. As you can see, we've got a long way to go. It says it's going to be 38 minutes. So here we go. I'm going to engage self-drive.
Oh, that is awkward and weird. This is my first time ever in a self-driving car. I think this is also my first time in a Model 3. Oh, no, I rode in Shane's Model 3. But yeah, this is wild and weird. This is like really
tell how nervous he is. So
uncanny,
yeah,
and extremely nerve-wracking at first. Like it's really fascinating because when somebody is driving, you can feel the humanness of their inputs, but that's completely gone. I wouldn't have thought that I would have been able to feel that, but you can.
After the first 10 minutes or so, I had yet to touch the wheel or pedals, and David Lovett was still pretty nervous about this, especially as we were about to get on the interstate.
I don't know how you trained your body to not instinctively grab the steering wheel and like stand on the brakes as you're coming up to a stoplight. Like I'm over here like trying to push my foot through the floorboard. So have you found that it's easier for your mind to wander if you're not actually a part of the driving experience?
Yes and no. So I will say that with the car driving itself, I do vigilantly watch the road. In fact, I kind of have to. I don't know. I just haven't told you that there's a camera right there.
Yeah.
And it's watching me. And if it sees me pick up my phone and play on it, or if it sees me looking away from the road for more than just a few seconds, it'll actually start complaining on the screen. And if I don't stop, it'll say like, please pay attention to the road. If I don't stop doing that, it'll start beeping at me and eventually it'll disengage. But just like a minute ago when you saw it change lanes, when I see that turn signal pop up, I instinctively just want to check, make sure that there really isn't a car there, Yeah. So I always do that. But I will say, though, that I am more relaxed when the car is driving, and I'm more free if I see something on the side of the road I want to look at, or a building, or whatever. I feel like I'm a little bit more free to take my eyes off the road for a few seconds than I would be. Likewise, if I want to find a song on the infotainment center or something, I will, especially in a situation like this, because of all the driving that I've let this car do, this situation here is the absolute safest. Like, it is not going to run into that car in front of us. That has never happened. That's just not going to happen.
Yeah.
Right? I'm more worried about when there's a merge, when there's, when you're in city traffic and you've got all the intersections and stuff. But yeah, when we're just cruising on the highway like this, it's extremely unlikely for it to make a mistake. So I do feel a little bit more relaxed to look around and take in the sights and stuff than I would normally.
15 minutes into the drive, I had yet to touch the wheel or pedals, and just as I thought he was starting to be more relaxed, we went over our first highway interchange, and I could see he was getting nervous again.
This is...
Sometimes there's just no words.
I know. It's like...
I can see how nervous you are over there and everything, but...
I feel like somebody who's been plucked out of the past and dropped into the future, and my brain is not quite ready for it. I'm still trying to get there, because there's a lot going on. Like, this is Sunday, so presumably you've driven this in the middle of a weekday when it is like absolutely brutal.
Right now you'd be sitting here in stop and go traffic.
Yeah.
So that's actually one of the reasons I said I wanted to do this on a non-rush hour day. Is not because the car can't handle it. It's just because it would take us 2 hours to get to
Dallas. Yeah. 2 hours to cover 25 miles.
A little over the halfway mark, I asked him how he was feeling about the ride so far.
But here we are. We're over halfway there, and as you can see, I have yet to
absolutely crushing it.
do anything.
I will say, we've been driving for 15 minutes now. In just 15 minutes, I've gone from extremely nervous to only slightly nervous, which is very impressive. It's absolutely incredible that this is even possible. If you'd asked me 15 years ago, I would have said not in my lifetime.
If you'd asked me a year ago, I would have said that.
Yeah.
A year ago, I didn't think that we were anywhere near this.
Over 30 minutes into the drive, we can finally see downtown Dallas in the distance.
I really do feel like, driverless cars, or at least self-driving cars, make sense. Because it's like you said, if you're 85 and you need to go to the store to get groceries, hop in the car and it can take you. It opens up a whole world, which I think it's awesome. Terrifying. But then again, if I actually feel more comfortable riding in the passenger seat with the self-driving driving through this situation than I would with a 15-year-old who just got their learner's permit, right?
So 36 minutes into the drive, as we drove through the mayhem that is downtown traffic, I posed the question to David.
Well, let me ask you, when you see those videos on YouTube that says self-driving is never going to work, it doesn't work, it's a big scam, all those things, what do you have to say about that now that we're sitting in downtown Dallas? I have not touched the wheel since we left the house.
It's very nerve-wracking, but it is exceedingly capable. This is absolutely wild, and I do genuinely think that self-driving will happen because there's enough desire for it to happen. There's enough people that hate driving.
Oh yeah,
that it makes sense for this to just be a thing.
I can't wait for this to be good enough that I can go to sleep. Or now here's an interesting situation. We're gonna go around a guy
that's just sitting in the middle of the lane with his flashers on. That's of all the things it's done all day, that's probably the most impressive thing. I feel like that ability to be like, there's somebody in this lane that's got their flashers going and they're not going to move soon, So I'll wait until this lane's clear, move over, and then move back so I can make my turn. That is that's like a frightening level of capability to determine a fluid situation. Look at that, it's even picking up pedestrians walking on the sidewalks over there.
And a few minutes later, we were just about to be at the destination address.
It's just so much data to take in as a human if you're not familiar.
Ooh, that one almost tripped it up, but it caught it.
Yeah.
That was a dude crossing when he should not have been crossing.
Yeah. I think.
There we go. I think it's going to drop us off at this.
Okay. I went ahead and
I
checked
know. It was
over.
aiming for this one.
Okay.
That was your fault, not its fault.
I hit the brake because I thought maybe that was it.
So basically what happened was I disengaged FSD because I thought it had passed our parking garage, when in reality it had not. But overall, the drive went well, and honestly, exactly how I expected it to. As we pulled into the garage, David gave me his final thoughts on the drive.
Unbelievably impressive. I am completely and totally blown away.
After we parked, we took a short walk to find the giant eyeball. It certainly wasn't hard to spot. Unfortunately, we couldn't really get close to it because they were doing some sort of aerobics class or something in front of it. It seems like an odd place to do that, but there it is. It's just huge, and it's right in front of this building here. So if you're ever going to be in Dallas, here's something else for you to go check out.
Okay, so I just wanted to mention, I suspect there's going to be some people who are going to say that I faked the video by like editing out all of the times it nearly killed us or something like that. And so one of the things I did is I left a completely unedited video, one contiguous like 42 whatever minute clip. It also has all the conversation between me and David Lovett. We have a number of interesting conversations about philosophical things like the trolley problem and all that kind of stuff. So if you want to check that out, I'm putting a link to that down in the description as well.
And so when I watch videos like this one, for example, by Ben Jordan, which claims that no, your car will never be able to drive you around, I find myself confused, wondering if perhaps the last few months were a dream or a delusion or what. I'd also like to briefly mention this chart discussing the levels of autonomy. I see it tossed around often when discussing Tesla, and many people will point out that Tesla is technically considered number 2 on this list. But let's be realistic. After what you've just seen, I think you can agree that this isn't a fair placement. It probably has more to do with what something is legally certified for rather than what it can really do, because I feel like my Tesla should easily be here at number 4. Okay, so now that we've seen what it can do, I need to mention a few other things. First of all, I'm currently using FSD version 12.6.4, and my 2022 Tesla is equipped with self-driving hardware version 3, which came out in 2019 and is already obsolete and can't even run the latest FSD software. Most shipping Teslas include hardware version 4 these days, and the new Robotaxi is apparently already on hardware version 5. So if you thought my car did well on the drive, just imagine how much better the later hardware and software is. In fact, now I want to go back and mention the Mark Rober video again. Remember, he was just using Autopilot for this test, but another YouTuber, Kyle Paul, recently recreated that scenario using FSD and found that hardware 4 Teslas would actually stop for the Wile E. Coyote wall. However, when he tested hardware 3 Teslas like mine, it did in fact still crash right through it. Fortunately, this is not a phenomenon people can expect to encounter in the real world. Okay, so where does that put Tesla on this scale I created? Well, I think with the current version in my car, I'd put it right here. Maybe a bit better than a student driver, but not as good as an experienced, sober human driver. And it's possible that newer versions with hardware 4 that I can't use in my car may already be at the level of a human driver. I'm not sure. So what I want to show you now is this video I captured on my dash cam a few months ago while driving home from the arcade at night. Notice the Tesla on the right. That's a woman's feet hanging out the side of the window. And she looks to me like she's highly intoxicated. Now, let's be real, I'm not in any way, shape, or form condoning this behavior. You shouldn't be behind the wheel if you're intoxicated. That being said, if you're going to do it anyway, which clearly some people do, you're actually better off letting the Tesla do the driving. In the case of this woman, it's probably for the best that she's letting her car do the driving.
Okay, so let's be real for a moment. The car doesn't always do everything right. And so I wanted to be as objective as possible. And so I've got a collection of dashcam clips that I wanted to show you. Now, some of these clips show the car doing amazingly well in edge case scenarios. Some of these clips show the car making mistakes. Let's take a look at some of these.
In this situation, there was a four-way stop and I was turning left. I pulled up right as the other cars were taking off. Then the Tesla decided it was its turn. So I do think the other cars had right of way, but it was such a close call I had to watch the footage myself to be sure who was in the wrong. In this case, I was driving at night through a construction zone and a cat ran across the road. It's a bit hard to see in the video, but the car actually slammed on the brakes to avoid hitting the cat. So that's one definitely in favor of the car. This is an example where I had to take control. There was a motorcycle wreck that had just occurred in front of me, and the turn lane was blocked, so the car stopped. The car would have basically stayed here indefinitely until the blockage was clear. Fortunately, I was able to take over and maneuver around. I wouldn't even call this a safety issue, but, if it were a robotaxi and you were a passenger, you'd be annoyed. So in this video, the car on my left starts drifting over into my lane. Since there was nobody in the lane on the other side, the car took action and moved partially into that lane to avoid an accident. So, another one in favor of the car. Now here's an interesting one. There's road construction and the cones force us into the wrong side of the road. The Tesla does a good job at following the cones and everything, but the trouble is, see, the light turns red, and after a moment the car decides to just go, most likely because it doesn't realize the light being way over to the right applies to us. So I had to hit the brakes to stop it. Now, to be fair, this isn't really a safety issue because the car knew that there was no other traffic and it wouldn't have pulled out into another car, but it could have gotten a ticket for running a red light. Here's another situation. I took this on my iPhone. The traffic lights were malfunctioning, but the car seemed to know exactly what to do and treated it just like a four-way stop. These unusual, unexpected type situations are exactly the sort of thing that I worried about with self-driving cars, but in most cases, the car has handled them like a champ. I have also used FSD in the rain with no problem, but I have not used it in a heavy thunderstorm yet, so I'm not sure how it would behave there. And since I live in Texas, it may be another few years before I can try driving in snow. Here's a bizarre situation. I'm not sure what the heck has happened here. There's debris in the left lane of the freeway and even a whole tire and wheel, although it doesn't seem to have come from the stopped vehicle in front. Anyway, Smurf sees this junk and does indeed stop for it and merge into traffic like a champ. And here I want to show what's honestly the worst problem that FSD has, at least with the version I have. Sometimes when a lane is going to end, the car is not proactive enough in getting over. And when that happens, sometimes it's too late because there's too much traffic, or sometimes it just keeps going right over the bumps, like in this case. I did take the wheel and force it into the other lane, but I'd like to think it would have stopped before hitting that curb, but we'll never know for sure. So I want to break down my personal experience into a pie chart showing the various reasons I've had to intervene. I can easily say beyond any doubt that at least 75% of these have been due to a disagreement between me and the map. So let me give you an example of what I mean about route disagreements. Let's say the route shows you're about to exit the freeway and then get right back on. Now that's fine, for example, if there's an obvious backup on the freeway, but I'm sure anyone that uses GPS has seen examples of this where clearly there's no backup on the freeway, at least not anymore. So in a case like that, I intervene and make it stay on the freeway. So this is just one example, but things like this definitely represent the bulk of the intervention I've had to do. And even if I didn't intervene, it isn't really a problem that I would consider dangerous, it's just annoying. And here's another example. There's a spot where going southbound, 820 splits off into 121. Well, in the past, to stay on 820 meant being in the right lanes. But after some recent construction, it's now switched. And now you need to be in the left lane. It took nearly 6 months for the map to be updated to reflect this, so the car always wanted to take the wrong lane, thus I would always have to intervene.
So the question is, imagining for a moment that this happened in a driverless car, either whether it be literally a car with no humans in it, or whether it be like a robotaxi or something like that. Well, it's not an inherently dangerous problem. It just took a wrong turn, and so it would obviously reroute with GPS, just like GPS does with a human driver when you take a wrong turn. So it's not inherently dangerous. It just might be annoying, especially if you're like a passenger in a taxi or something like that.
Also, along these lines, the navigation will often decide it wants to take the express lane, which I don't mind paying for if there's a terrible backup on the main highway, but I don't want to pay like $5 just to save 30 seconds. So I'll often take over to avoid getting on the express lane if I don't think it's worth it. So another related problem I've experienced is this rural highway that I drive on every now and then. And the car wants to stop here in order to make a right turn. And this is exactly correct. It's exactly what the car is supposed to do. But all the local people line up down the shoulder and use it as a turn lane, even though it isn't marked as such, and is probably technically illegal. And this ends up blocking my car from being able to make the correct legal right turn. Now, right now, the city probably doesn't care, but if there were more autonomous cars on the road and this started to be more of a problem, then the city might come out and restripe the road like this in order to make that a proper turn lane. And this brings me to another point. I think once autonomous cars reach a certain tipping point, cities will begin to address issues like this, which will actually improve the operation of the cars without needing to improve the cars themselves. To use an analogy from computing history, there was this clone of the Apple II called the Laser 128. It was only like 95% compatible, but the computer was extremely popular, and once sales reached a certain point, software companies started testing their software with the Laser to ensure compatibility. Thus, the Laser became even more compatible after a few years, even though the computer itself didn't change. And so, yeah, I think we're going to see this a lot with cities and road planning. So, back to my pie chart, the next 20% of reasons for me intervening would be what I call preventing annoyance to other drivers. For example, sometimes the car will be going too slow or too fast. Sometimes it wants to change lanes only to change right back again. And believe it or not, this is also related to map problems most of the time. I've already determined that there's more than one map or data set that the car relies on, and here's some proof of this. There's a bridge near my house that was recently built, and they moved the whole road over about 100 feet to one side. Now notice that the blue line represents the course the car has plotted to drive, but the white line is the actual road, and clearly they don't match up. So the navigation is plotting a course based on one map, and displaying the graphics based on a more updated map.
So I believe erroneous map data is probably the number one reason for the car to do weird things like changing over to a lane only to change right back again, or just suddenly braking for no reason. In fact, there was a construction zone recently where the speed limit had been reduced to 55 miles per hour. And even after that construction zone had been removed and the speed limit restored, the car still believed it was 55 miles an hour every time it would enter this spot, thus hitting the brakes. And it took months for that to be resolved. And I know these are map-related problems because they always happen in exactly the same place.
And while these behaviors aren't necessarily dangerous, they are annoying, especially to other drivers on the road. So when that sort of thing happens, I intervene. So the last 5% of the interventions I would say are for safety reasons. And over the last 4 months that I've been using the system, I probably had to take over maybe 3 or 4 times for what I perceived as a safety issue. And there's no guarantee there would have been a crash had I not, but I wasn't willing to take the risk. The majority of these cases have been related to merging into traffic when the lane I'm in comes to an end. The car often waits until the last minute to merge. Interestingly enough, in some states, that's actually the law, and it's called zipper merge. But we don't do that in Texas. In fact, it's considered rude here to wait until the lane ends to merge, and often people refuse to let you in. And so this has been the most common safety-related issue I've encountered.
Okay, so I just got some final thoughts I want to talk about before we wrap up this video completely. So there's probably going to be some people asking, like that trip I took to Dallas, and there was, I touched nothing. Like I did nothing from the time we left my driveway to the time we got to Dallas. And people are going to ask, like, is that normal or was that an anomaly? And the truth is, that's actually pretty normal. I mean, I don't drive to downtown Dallas very often, but I do drive to the arcade like 4 or 5 times a week, and that's a half-hour drive each direction, and I almost always let the car drive, and very rarely do I have to do anything. So yeah, in fact, I've gone through a number of emotional stages with FSD. So the first couple of weeks I started using it back in 2024, I was a nervous wreck, kind of like David Lovett was in the video that you saw. But after a couple of weeks, I kind of got used to that and started to trust it a bit more. And then I was just, for the next few weeks, I was just kind of in this state of awe when I was driving. I would just be looking around like, this is amazing. I'm in the future. I can't believe it, and all this kind of stuff. And then after a few weeks of that, I just got to where it was just commonplace. Now I'm, looking around like, why isn't everybody using this? This is just how I get around now, So that's kind of the stage that I'm in now. And in fact, I wanted to mention that sometimes I feel like I'm in the Harry Potter universe because it's like I'm willing to bet there's probably a lot of drivers that don't even realize my car is electric when they see it going down the road. But I'm willing to bet 99.9% of drivers that see my car have no idea that my car is driving itself and that I'm basically just a passenger in the car. So I can kind of say it's almost like I'm a wizard driving down the road and everyone else is a muggle. They're just completely oblivious to the fact. So a couple other things I wanted to mention. So first of all, I discovered quite by accident one day that if I set FSD, if I enable it without setting a course, it still enables. It still goes. And I discovered this one day, and I was driving or letting the car drive around, and I was like, wonder why it's going this way. And it took a weird turn, and then it took another, and I'm like, where is it going? And so I looked down at the map to see like where it had plotted to go, and then I realized I never set a course. It's just driving randomly. And so one of these days when I get a little time, I want to set the camera back up in the car and just turn on FSD and just see like, where does it go? Does it go home like to its factory? You know, I don't know. I'm curious to figure out where it goes given no instructions. And of course, I got one more thing I'm going to say, if people even make it this far in the video, is I'm sure there's going to be a ton of people in the comments saying that I doxed myself. And I know, because I've gone through this like dozens and dozens of times already. And because, yeah, you can see where I live by tracing back the route that we took, or just look up my license plate number or whatever. And the reality is, I was just going to say, my address has never been a secret. It isn't a secret now, and it has never been a secret. And so you might say, well, David, how come you cover up your addresses in a video? And the actual reason that I do that is just so people won't bug me so much, because every time I've shown my address, I get like 1,000 emails and 1,000 comments in the comment section. I've even had people text me and call me at like 3 a.m. telling me, David, you doxed yourself. You got to take that video down. And I'm like, the address was never a secret to begin with. So if you were getting ready to run to your keyboard to tell me that I have revealed my address, then please just don't worry about it. It's not an issue. So anyway, I think that actually wraps it up for this episode. So as always, thanks for watching.